you're never past menopause, because once you're in menopause for the rest of your life. And now, more important than like ever before. Now, obviously, it's always important through every life stage, but it is so critical now that you look at what you're eating, because now we are more susceptible to other things as our hormones are becoming or lowering into those menopausal ranges. So nutrition is key, and it's how we feel. It has to do with our brain health. It has to do with so many things that affect us on a day-to-day level, our blood sugar levels, our fatigue, our energy levels, right? Everything.
Welcome to another episode of the Hack My Age podcast. Today, we're going to meet Andrea Donsky, and we covered a ton about menopause and symptoms. She talked about the 103 symptoms of menopause and how that's going to be published work soon. She's a nutritionist. She's been doing this for 20 years. So she talked about some of the most important points about tweaking your diet during menopause and this perimenopause phase, and what foods to include or avoid for hot flashes, sleep, and some other symptoms, and her take on how to go through the menopause transition naturally. And we talked about the demonization of certain foods. I think that was a little uncomfortable for a moment. I don't think she was ready for that one. And then the connections between diet, menopause, and long-term health outcomes like osteoporosis and heart disease. And we took some pretty deep dive into some supplements because that's her jam. She loves to talk about supplements. And we talked about the ones mostly for hot flashes, night sweats, and sleep. And she talked about one that I didn't even know about. I can't even remember the name, but you have to go listen to it. But it's some new thing. And the takeaways, that takeaway that I had for this episode was, you know what you got to do to be healthy. Just do your best, self-experiment, and find balance. Really, that was it. But when we talked about supplements, I wasn't planning on talking so much about them. She's got her own company, which of course, I guess I should have guessed that. But some really interesting thing that she told me off camera, it's not going to be there, was about her experience with black cohosh and vitex, which are really popular ingredients or plants that are in most menopause supplements. You'll find these. And she took them both, but I don't know which one it was, but one doubled the size of her cyst. I think it was an ovarian cyst, but it's like, whoa. So she's like, you got to be really careful with what you're putting in your body. Because we started talking so much about her own supplements, I was like, why are you so special? I had to ask. But she seems like one of these people, like Leslie Kinney, who creates Primeadine, Spermidine, or Nicola Conlon, who creates Nutritional, which, those are pretty much the two supplements that I talk most about, because I know these women and I know they have integrity and I know they don't cut corners. They're such good products and they're such good people. And she sounded a lot like those girls. So I'm getting to know her a little bit better. I should probably get some of her supplements to see what they're all about, but she sounds like she really does her due diligence in trying to create safe and efficacious things. I have no idea how much this costs, but she did give us a discount. I totally put her on the spot. I was like, give us a discount. So she will send me a link for 15% off. Yay. And there you go. So go look for that if you want to try them out. If you've tried some of her supplements, and I think it's called Morphus, or wearemorphus.com, let me know, because I want your feedback. I can't talk about a product or recommend it unless I try it or I have some feedback from you, preferably both. Now let's meet Andrea Donsky. Before we do that, just a little quick reminder that we are also on YouTube. So go ahead to YouTube if you like YouTube videos, and watching it there, you see all the action in person. So Andrea Donsky, really quick bio about her. She's known as the menopause educator and researcher, and she's got over 300,000 TikTok followers. She's doing something right. And she's a nutritionist for over 20 years. I mentioned that, and on a mission to change the conversation around perimenopause and menopause. Yay. That's what we're trying to do too. But she's also a brilliant entrepreneur, and she's got several decades of experience in the health and wellness industry already. So she knows what's going on there. And she is not only this influencer and nutritionist, but she's also a media personality, speaker, author, And then, of course, soon to be published researcher. You can hear her voice, like how proud she is of herself and how important that probably is for her, especially when you're not somebody like a doctor or, it's really hard to be talking about some of the things that we talk about because who are you? So I'm sure that gives her a really good boost and credibility. She hosts a really great podcast that you guys should all listen to. I'll have that in the show notes, called Menopause Reimagined. She's got some great guests on there, and she talks about a lot of cool topics, all related to menopause, of course. And she is on TV all over the North America as a menopause expert. And so you may even recognize her if you see her on YouTube or hear her voice, because she's been on over 500 TV segments, and she's been featured on every major network across U.S. and Canada. How cool is that? And her latest venture, wearemorphous.com, is to help women reimagine menopause as a journey of empowerment so they feel heard, supported, and validated. Her business baby is called Morphous, which empowers women to take control of their symptoms and health with nutrition, lifestyle, research, and science-backed supplements. And you'll hear in this episode that Andrea is she's in the middle of writing a book about menopause, and that's going to be released in the spring of 2026. So now let's get started with the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's first talk about what got you interested in becoming a menopause educator and a researcher.
I have been, well, at the time I was in the health and wellness industry for a very long time. And I started in my late 20s and was very passionate about helping people make healthier choices when it comes to what we're putting in and on our body. And then when I was in my mid to late 40s and started to realize that now I'm in a different stage of life, I thought, okay, well, usually when it's my like Morphous is my third company, and usually I've been with the same business partner, her name is Randy, for 25 years. It'll be in 2025, which is very exciting. And we've always had companies based on where we were at in our life cycle. And as I knew I was going, well, once I found out I was in perimenopause and then menopause, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start to learn everything I possibly can about this stage of life. And that's what led me down the rabbit hole of really trying to understand what was happening to my body, because I was thrown into this stage of life, like so many of your listeners, I'm sure, like yourself, I'm sure. And us Gen Xers, we didn't learn about it, right? We didn't. And I would say to myself, or pride myself on the fact that I was a health and wellness expert for so many years, for 17 years at the time, before I realized I was in perimenopause, and I knew nothing about where we were at. I knew nothing. My mom never spoke to me about perimenopause or menopause. My grandmother never did. My school, I never learned about it in school. My doctor, when I got to, or I had my first hot flash, I was like, what is going on? I was so in the dark. And that's what led me down to the research and speaking to people and understanding what was going on. And the way my brain works, Aura, is like, once I try to understand something and I learn something new, I want to share it with everybody else. And I had already had the platform to do so. So I thought, all right, well, now I'm just going to talk about perimenopause and menopause. And here we are.
Well, thank God you are, because we need more people speaking about it. And like you, same thing. I was never interested in the topic. I was in my 40s and I'm an asymptomatic person. So I'm just like, I guess I'll get there when I'm over 50. And then it was the demand, actually, because I was podcasting about biohacking just for women over 50. I had all this demand, like, tell us more about hormones, tell us about menopause, tell us more about perimenopause. So then I had to take the deep dive, and I said, well, I might as well anyways. And then of course, now I'm beating the drum of, I'm most worried about the asymptomatic woman, because she's the one who's not going to go get tested. She's going to want that's ignore perhaps some of these other symptoms of menopause that we don't know about. And actually that leads me to my next question perfectly, because it was from you. I heard you first on Natalie Needham's podcast, Longevity, and you were talking about the research that you were doing and that there are so many menopause symptoms. And I usually heard that I was like 30, 35, and you said like over 100 symptoms. And then I went to your website and I saw them listed. It's on wearemorphous.com. And I I was just like, whoa, blown away. And actually, the deeper I dove and the more questions I'd ask the women around me or in my community, yes, there are some many really strange symptoms of menopause. So let's go over those 10 symptoms just that you have in your survey. Actually, you were great. You talk a lot about those top 10 from the survey and the research that you've done. And then let's talk about those lesser known ones.
Sure. So I'm gonna, if it's okay, I just want to take you back for a minute in terms of the symptoms themselves. So what's interesting, and you mentioned, so number one, you're talking about asymptomatic. So we know, and again, when I say it's known or it's out there, and I'm still trying to find the source and or sources for it, is that we know that about 13 to 15% of women don't have symptoms, and or it's thought that they don't have symptoms. So I challenge that because I really believe it's a lot less than that, because a lot of us, like you said, we hear about the most common or well-known symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, which are the 34 most recognized. And it's interesting. I'm writing a book right now. It's coming out in 2026. And I was trying to find the original source for the most recognized, those 34 symptoms. There's only one source, and it's like back to like 2013. So it's not, it's so interesting how things become known, right? So when I was, several years ago, I was at a party with my husband and I met an old friend and I asked her what she was doing. And I was just starting to get into all of this and really start to learn about perimenopause and menopause. And I asked her what she was doing. And she said that she was starting an app for menopausal symptoms. And at the time, I was like, "Oh, really? An app? Like, there are enough symptoms that you can actually put it on an app? Because don't you need more than like two or three?" I was so like, at the time, I just didn't know. And she was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. There's like 35 to 40." And the way my brain works, I was like, "Oh, okay. Let me go and actually like track that." And I started a Google Doc and I started tracking it. And then pretty quickly, I realized that there's way more than 35 to 40 symptoms based on what women were saying, based on what I was reading in the medical journals, based on what I was seeing on social media, speaking to family and friends. So I, at the time, thought, this was a couple of years later, I'm like, okay, I really want to understand how many are there? Like, really, how many are there? So we started a survey on our website, which was our original foundational survey called the Signs and Symptoms of Menopause. And we quickly realized, there's now about 5,000 responses, which is pretty incredible. But I just came back from the Menopause Society, their annual conference that they have every single year, and I presented 4 posters because 4 abstracts, so 4 of our surveys, the abstracts are going to be published in the journal Menopause in December. So now the Signs and Symptoms of Menopause, having 103 plus symptoms, is going to be published in the journal Menopause. So it is now recognized. So I am so excited because all the work that we have all done, because I mean, we initiated this survey, but now we have 5,000 women who have answered and responded to this survey, that it is now going to be published and recognized that there's 103 plus symptoms of perimenopause and menopause.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you. I am over the moon and still pinching myself that I'm going to be a published researcher. It's so exciting. But the point is that now we know that there are the 103. So what are they? So to answer your question, what are they? So this is based on, right now. So it's always ongoing, right? So this is based on more almost at that or at that 5,000 response mark. So fatigue is the number one most common symptom. So many of us, when we think, we're like, oh, you think of menopause, you think of hot flashes, you think of night sweats, you think of mood swings, but hot flash, that's not the number one symptom. It's fatigue. And that's across the board for perimenopause and menopause. More common though for women in perimenopause than menopause. So fatigue, extreme, number one. Number two is brain fog. 66% of women have brain fog, 72% with fatigue. Sleep issues, number three. Memory loss, number four. Anxiety, number five. And we can get into that too, because I have an actual survey on sleep and on anxiety as well. Then we have loss of libido, which is number six. Joint pain, number seven. Lack of concentration, number eight. Lack of focus, number nine. And hot flashes come in at number 10. So those are the top 10 according to those 5,000 responses. And again, we're constantly updating it. And when I presented the poster at the conference last week, we based that on 2,300. I was like 2,239 responses. So the only thing that changed from the 2,239 to the 5,000 is libido went up to it was number 10, and now it went up to number 6.
Interesting that hot flashes was number 10, because hot flashes and maybe losing your period, I guess other people, that's the two markers that it seems that women go, oh, okay, well, I've lost my period. I'm clearly whatever in menopause. But the hot flash or night sweats, oh no, I didn't have that, so I didn't go through menopause. And I'm like, but you're 60 and you don't have your period anymore. I think you are in menopause. And I just posted a reel to yesterday with a 63-year-old woman saying exactly this. So it's rampant in that sense. And I think a lot of people are missing the mark. So yeah, but fatigue, I think fatigue, a lot of people would say, oh, well, that's just aging, because men get tired too, right? But
Yeah.
I think it's the point is, yeah, with the loss of the hormones, maybe we fatigue more in conjunction with the loss of our hormones, or perhaps earlier on than men, and you could classify it as a menopause symptom. And how would you distinguish, oh, this is aging, which I also don't believe aging, aging and fatigue have to go hand in hand, or illness or menopause.
I mean, there could be, for fatigue alone, there could be 30 different reasons as to why we're exhausted, right? So that's why when it comes to, women, when I speak to women, I'm like, look, there's a lot of different reasons as to why things can be happening. Hormones being a major part of it, obviously, but there's other things too. So one of the, I like to, my whole thing is about empowering women to take charge of their health and their symptoms as they go into perimenopause and menopause. So I'm like, well, let's rule out some things. Go to the doctor and ask to have your thyroid checked, ask to have your vitamin D levels checked, your B12, your ferritin. I mean, there are some fundamental things that we know our body's constantly changing and evolving, right? So go get those things checked and let's see, could it be due to the fact that your thyroid is now low? Could it be due that your vitamin D, you're deficient in vitamin D? So there's so many different reasons. Are you drinking enough, right? Are you so there isn't that one thing that we can pinpoint it, but it is the major thing that women in perimenopause and menopause, and these are women over the age of 35, are experiencing as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So no, I think that survey, and it's an ongoing survey. People can go and sign up, right? And still take part in the survey. Is that true?
Please, yes, it's ongoing. We're going to continue going. I want to get, obviously we're at that 5,000 mark now, and that's only one survey. We have 10 of them, soon to come more. We're in the works of working on some new ones right now, which I'm very excited about. But we have 10 of them right now, including we have our signs and symptoms. So the 4 that are going to be published, we have our signs and symptoms, we have our sleep, we have our anxiety survey, and then we also have our doctor's visit survey. So we looked at women, how many times they're going to their doctor before the connection is made between them being in this phase of life and how they're feeling. And then we have another one, our phantom smell survey. So we've got a lot, our women in the workplace survey, stigma, programs and policies. So there's quite a few. So please, if your listeners are interested in helping further our research, I mean, I always say your voice, all of our voices matter. We need to hear from you. You are the ones that are going through what you're going through. So, and even if you have no symptoms, great. We want to hear from you. And if you could fill out our surveys, yes, please. They're all on our website.
Oh, fantastic. I'll have a link in the show notes to that. Let's
Thank
remind
you.
people that phantom smells, what is that? And and that is a perimenopause or menopause symptom.
Yes. So this goes back to your question before of what are some of the less known symptoms? So, or the less common ones. So the less known ones, I would say, but they're common. Phantom smells. So phantom smells it was actually one of my first symptoms and I didn't know it. So I was in perimenopause for a total of 14 years, 11 of which I didn't know I was in perimenopause. So my perimenopause journey started in my mid 30s. And one of the main symptoms I had was phantom smells. So phantom smells are when you smell things that other people don't. They don't actually exist, because I'm often asked that question. Well, I'll smell something before anyone else realizes, and it's actually there. That's not a phantom smell. A phantom smell is you smell gasoline, but there is no gasoline there is no trace of that gasoline in your immediate environment.
And no one else is smelling it either.
No one else is smelling it. It doesn't exist. Yeah. And I would be in my office and all of a sudden I would smell cigarette smoke. I would smell gas. I would smell burnt toast. And I would ask those around me, and they were, some of them were in their 20s at the time. And I'd be like, do you smell that? And they're like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And it lasted for me for years. I went for a few MRIs. I went to my doctor many times and it always came back, you're clear. We don't know what's causing this. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, phantom smell. Well, now we know that it is a symptom of perimenopause and menopause. So what we dug into it and we wanted to understand, so there's a lot of different reasons for phantom smell. So I always say, go to your doctor, get it checked out, get that clean bill of health, because there can be different causes. But if they cannot find what those causes are, then we could chalk it up to being a perimenopause symptom, or menopause symptom, but you need to go get that checked out because it could be something serious, right? So we wanted to dig into what are the most common phantom smells that women in perimenopause and menopause are smelling. And number one is cigarette smoke, or any smoke for that matter, by far. Then it's then it's BO, and then it's mildew. Those are the top three.
It's
But there are
never
some crazy
chocolate
ones.
chip cookies or strawberries or
So
anything.
actually, it is
It
interesting that
is.
you say that. It is so interesting that you say that. So the majority of women, it's cigarette smoke. It's something like so many women have the cigarette smoke. Like they're like, and it's by far, like we're talking like a major, I think it's something in the 40s. Like I'm trying to find the exact stat, but
And it's not because they're living with a smoker or something and
nope,
they're dating a smoker and like they smell it and the person who's smoking doesn't smell it anymore.
nope, it is, nope, exactly. No, it's not. So smoke is number one, then mildew. And so smoke, number one, mildew, BO. Then you have like overheated electronics, weed. That's a big one. Cat pee, sulfur, sewage, burning plastic, the burnt toast and coffee. Then like people will say like oily hair, gasoline, poop. So those are all like the ones who are like, ew, gross. And but to your point, I've had women tell me that they smell blueberry muffins, chocolate chip cookies, chicken soup, garlic, onions,
Right.
chrysanthemums. Like there are pleasant phantom smells, but it's a smaller percentage. But it does exist. And every time when I do a video on social media and women are like, I smell this. And I'm like, oh, you are one of the more blessed ones that have like these nicer phantom smells. But for the most of us, not so pleasant.
So that must have something to do with the, I don't know, estrogen receptors in the brain or something that are responsible for smell. I don't. Would you know anything about the mechanism of action? Like, why is this happening?
I know that it has to do with lower estrogen levels, but the actual like mechanism, biological, yeah, that's that of my lane.
Uh, yeah, it'd be interesting to know like why. But my first thought is the brain. But let's move on to nutrition because that is your lane. That is a huge lane that you have, and you're a
Yeah,
nutritionist.
I am.
So let's talk about how big of an impact does nutrition make in managing menopause symptoms?
So yeah, so my lane is nutritionist. So I'm going to be a nutritionist for it's almost 20 years. So next year will be 20 years that I am one. And nutrition, lifestyle, supplements, and research. That is my lane. And nutrition plays a massive role. So the way I look at it is nutrition and lifestyle, really. They go hand in hand. So when I talk lifestyle, I'm talking movement, I'm talking, exercise. If you can, exercise is so good for us. I'm talking managing stress. All of these are very important and it goes hand in hand with nutrition. So we are what we eat and we are what we absorb. So it really is or should be the foundation of how we look at everything as, we approach this phase. And when I talk about nutrition is, a lot of women will say to me, Andrea, I don't have to worry about anything anymore. Like I don't need to take supplements. I don't need to look at my nutrition or, worry about my, well, obviously we always worry, all of us worry about our stress, but I don't have to it's not as important now because I'm through that. I'm past that. I'm past menopause. And I always say you're never past menopause because once you're in menopause for the rest of your life. And now, more important than like ever before. Now, obviously, it's always important through every life stage, but it is so critical now that you look at what you're eating because now we are more susceptible to other things as our hormones are becoming or are lowering into those menopausal ranges. So, nutrition is key and it's how we feel, it has to do with our brain health. It has to do with so many things that affect us on a day-to-day level, our blood sugar levels, our fatigue, our energy levels, right? Everything. So I always say that when we go, so we won't want to focus on eating a certain amount of protein in our diet. So and we don't want to overcomplicate things too for people because it becomes overwhelming, right? It's like do this, do that. No, 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 no. Let's just understand the fundamentals of what we need to look at here and then do what works best for your body. What worked for you before you got here probably won't work for you the same way anymore. Our bodies are changing. So, and what works for you, Zora, may not work for me. And that's okay. So there is no like, you have to do this because your body is very different than mine genetically, makeup, day to day, like we're different. But there are some fundamentals. For example, getting enough protein. We do need enough protein. So I say aim for that 30 grams of protein. Look at incorporating lots of vegetables, green vegetables. We need a lot of fiber, 25 to 35 grams. Again, it's that thrown out
Per
number.
day or per meal?
So the 30 grams of protein per meal is important.
Okay.
The 25 to 35 grams of protein per day, if you can, that's where you want to aim. If you can't get it all from your food, there are supplements you could take. Like we have Fiber S, which is amazing, like a soluble fiber. So you don't, a lot of women will get, or even me, like I get anxious. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to make sure I hit all these things, right? Like just do what you can to do your best and don't over stress about it, because that will make things worse for you too, right? So try to get your protein, your 30 grams per meal. Protein is great, by the way, and for so many different reasons. It helps to keep us full, right? So it helps with CCK and peptide YY. It helps to satiate you. It helps with blood sugar regulation. It helps with bones. It helps with muscles. Like it helps with a lot of different things. So making sure we get enough protein is important in right now for us. Making sure you're getting enough vegetables, enough fiber, low glycemic fruits, berries. I love berries. Amazing. Sour apples. Amazing, right? They contribute towards your fiber intake, which is good. You want to look at eating good quality fats. So really paying attention. Now, so my background and my expertise is in what are we putting in our bodies? What are we looking at from our food supply? I wrote a book called Unjunk Your Junk Food back in 2011. We looked at ingredients in foods. Ingredients, according to the research that we know, can be beneficial or can harm our bodies in many cases, right? So really trying to be mindful of those ingredients you're putting in your bodies, reading the labels when you're shopping. What do they have? Do they have unnecessary additives? Are there other options that you can use instead of, right? That still taste great, that are still, you want to eat or you want to consume them. So these are things to pay attention to. Looking at your legumes, your complex carbohydrates, looking at your legumes, nuts and seeds, and looking at your hydration. How much are you drinking? All of these are important, but you may be, for some of you, in more moderation. Like for me, I have to consume legumes and my nuts and seeds in more moderation for me. And then looking at those fats. What are you taking in terms of your oils that you're using on a regular basis? We need fat. I'm sure you talk about that all the time. But what type of fat are you consuming? Are you consuming trans fats, or are you consuming olive oil and avocado oil and coconut oil, which contains trans fats, but also again moderation, which is beneficial for us. So these are the things that we just have to start paying attention to, because all of that will affect how we feel and in many cases affect our symptoms.
I like that you mentioned, there's not one size fits all. What works one,
No.
what doesn't work the other. And then we know that. Hopefully if nobody has heard of that before, you remember it, because it is really important, because we're all so different. So I'm wondering then, what are your thoughts, especially on social media, when it comes to this demonization of foods, of maybe sugar or certain oils, or I don't know, whatever it is. I mean, there's people I think have a fear of food now, and think twice. I mean, it's maybe not so bad to think twice before you put something in your mouth, but I'm wondering, what you think of what we're seeing out there in social media.
That's a very loaded question. So I think, as a nutritionist, I do think that there are certain things that are not beneficial for our bodies. I do.
Everyone.
And
Never, ever, ever.
And I do believe that we want to be mindful so that we don't go to the opposite end of. So from a consumer standpoint, from the women who from us. So I'm a nutritionist, so I'm coming from a different standpoint, but for women who are trying to get the most information they can and do the best they can, we're all trying to do the best we can, right? So I think the number one most important thing is to listen to your body. If you eat something, so even though someone tells you aspartame is okay and that you can have tons of it, but you consume it and you get a headache and you don't feel well after, then don't have it. So I believe that we are the captain of our own ship. So lots of people, and there's a lot of information out there and conflicting information, which is why it becomes so hard for the average person to be like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Hello, like help me. Like it's so, even me who is in this industry, who comes from a background of being a nutritionist, I'm like, okay, like it's overwhelming, right? So I do believe that there are things that we know according to the research, and you'll find research on both ends. You'll find research that things are good for you. You'll find research that things are not good for you, right? So at the end of the day, you got to decide what you want to put in your body. Are there things that we know that are not good for us? Yes, absolutely. Do we know that consuming ultra processed sugar, a lot of it, again, it also comes down to the amounts, it comes down to when, like there are a lot of nuances. There's, in my opinion, nothing is so black and white. There's the nuances. So, too much of anything, in my opinion, isn't always a great thing, right? So be mindful of how much you're doing it. Try to balance it as best as you can and listen to your body, how you feel when you're eating it. So I know for me, if I have too much ultra processed sugar, it triggers a hot flash for me. Or if I have alcohol now, I'm getting my hot flashes and night sweats and my sleep are disturbed. So I know how certain foods affect me. So paying attention and listening to your body is the number one, in my opinion, the number one most important thing we need to do.
Yeah, I think it's really hard with to do that. I think some people are not intuitive, or they just, they just put all their faith into an article they read or something their friend said, or something you see on social media. And it's really hard. And in Europe, we have, it's very different, I think, compared to the US in terms of the relationships with food and what's available and all that. But I do see, I get some people I know who are absolutely freaked out if they eat, I don't know, something that they shouldn't be, that's been demonized. And I think, oh my gosh, this poor person. I mean, it's, again, if it goes back down, if they're feeling bad, yeah, they really shouldn't be doing it. But sometimes I think it goes a little bit too far.
Well, I think anything in moderation. Like I always say, try to aim for the 80-20 rule. And I try for 80% of the time, I really try my best to do what's best for me and how I feel. But there's those 20% of the time when I'm like, you know what, I want that. And I'm gonna eat it because eating it's gonna make me happier than stressing out. Like it's decisions, right? Like do what you think is best. So I like to follow that 80-20 rule. Now, if you're in a situation where you can't follow it because God forbid you have an issue or you need to do something much more strict, then absolutely you always listen to what your doctor, healthcare provider tells you what needs to be done. And then listen to yourself in terms of how you feel that's going to help your body or how it's going to help you, right? So if you have to be more strict, then be more strict. But for the average person, I mean, yes, there are foods that I don't believe that we should be ingesting. And I talk about it in my book. And I wrote the book called Undrunk Your Junk Food, and certain foods that I'm like, no. And that's my thing in terms of I just try to stay away from food additives. I just don't believe they're great for our bodies. And that's my thing. But everyone else has their own things of what they believe. But like I always say, you're at the end of the day, you're the ultimate boss and you decide what makes you feel good or not.
The food additive thing is I agree. And I love to teach people to read labels. I think it's really important. But when you think about when you eat out and the number of people that eat out these days, I mean, my kids, they're ordering stuff that when I was in college or in their age, there was no, like, didn't exist, these food delivery things, and you just wouldn't eat out that much. So I'm thinking about when you eat out, you don't know really what's in there, honestly. So again, you could drive yourself crazy, or you say I go out once a week, but
Right.
I think like, people are going out a little bit more than they should. I don't know.
Listen, for me, if you're gonna, when I eat out, I'm eating out and I know that I'm eating out and I'm gonna enjoy my meal. And now I will make modifications. Like I prefer not to have seed oils. I've interviewed Dr. Kate Shanahan many times. I prefer, and I also know how they make my body feel. They cause inflammation in my body. I get, my symptoms get worse. I get pins and needles at the bottom of my feet. I just don't feel good having it. And when you go out and you eat out, restaurants are using seed oil. So like canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower, grapeseed, rice bran, whatever it is they're using. So I will ask, if I order a salad, I'll ask to have my dressing on the side. I'll ask for olive oil and lemons and I'll just add it on myself. So I will make provisions for myself, but am I going to worry what's in a specific? I can't. That's where I draw the line. If I'm eating out, I'm enjoying myself. So again, if you're at the point where you're like, no, I don't, I really don't want to eat out, and that's okay too. And you want to create everything and make everything from scratch, then my gosh, that's awesome. So it's hard to I just feel it becomes overwhelming and then we're stressing about everything, which is even worse for us. And I think we know now that anxiety, 66% of us are more anxious now than we were before. So doing what we can to mitigate that anxiousness, in my opinion, is very important. But at the same time, being mindful and listening to yourself.
Yeah, it's such a balance. We're talking about nutrition for menopause as a general, just, you'll feel better by maybe adopting some of these things or not eating so many processed foods. But what about something specific like hot flashes in terms of avoiding certain foods? Let's talk a bit about that in your experience and research. What are you finding is triggering a hot flash you should maybe stay away from?
Well, I'll talk about personally. I mean, alcohol absolutely triggers a hot flash. Caffeine triggers a hot flash. And it used to be much worse. So I don't really drink it. I cannot drink anymore. I can't even have a sip of wine. I tried it and literally within seconds that I was like, okay, no. Like it's not worth it to me. Again, if you want to do it by all means, but I just know I'm going to suffer and I just don't want to suffer. So hot flashes, caffeine is a big trigger. Processed sugar is a big trigger, especially at night, which is interesting for me. And I'll talk personally, like if I have chocolate and dark chocolate and I have it before bed, I will have night sweats. So even timing when you're eating certain things, I find affects it. I've had women tell me if they eat processed sugar before bed, that'll trigger night sweats for them. So there are foods. So you need to listen to yourself, to your triggers as to what these foods, what are certain things that are triggering certain things. So it could be, ultra processed sugar is triggering your blood sugar spikes, right? Which we know that it's linked, right? You're going to eat something that has, doesn't have a lot of fiber in it. It's going to spike your blood sugar. So, but that might create more, anxiety for you or make you more anxious. So you, and a good rule of thumb is you are going to eat something, watch yourself for 24 hours, see how you feel. Because sometimes it can take that long for a symptom to present itself, right? And after you eat a certain food, let's say, for example. So just be mindful, write it down, put notes. Keeping a food journal is a little bit tougher, but if you have your note app on your phone, open it up and be like, okay, I had this piece of gum. It had 3 types of artificial sweeteners in it. It has, and then I got a headache, about, 3, 4, 6 hours later. Could it be that? So next time, try it again. Does it happen again? So just being mindful. And to your point is maybe some people aren't in tune with their body. That's okay. But write it down and see, and then start to become aware because you might see patterns develop based on what you're consuming.
That's the biohacker in you.
Yes, that actually, it's funny you mentioned Nat before, Natalie Nidham. So I'm not a biohacker. She's like, oh yeah, you are. I'm like, we're wearing like our wearables. I'm like, okay, I'll take it.
So what are your thoughts on quote unquote doing menopause naturally? And if you need an explanation, I'll explain.
Oh, I'm guessing you're meaning without hormones, without taking hormones. You mean that? Or
yeah, anything like hormones or yeah, anything that's drugs, medication, anything that's
yeah, I mean,
quote unquote not natural. Yeah.
I don't really have an opinion on it. Again, it comes down to what works best for you. I don't judge and I say do what works for you and what makes you happy. I come from a holistic background, so for me, I really wanted to try everything I possibly could using nutrition and lifestyle changes as well as supplements. And it worked for me. But I also wanted to try hormones. I wanted to try bioidentical hormones because I was in a community that a lot of women find incredible relief from it. Right. So I really wanted to I wanted to understand what my community was experiencing. So I say do whatever works for you. I have no opinion either way. My lane is nutrition, lifestyle, and supplements, which is what I educate on and where I feel comfortable speaking about. But if I always say we have our toolbox, and our toolbox is nutrition, lifestyle, supplements, and or hormones if that's what you choose to do. So I think that there is the amazing thing is that today we have so many options to pull from, and it doesn't only have to be one thing. Please, I really, even if you're on hormones, please look at nutrition and lifestyle and supplements because everything works synergistically together. And I think that we are so blessed now to be able to have all of these options to choose from, including if there's certain medications you want to go down that route. I don't know much about them. I was at the conference last week and I met a lot of the companies, the pharma companies that were there, but I didn't do a deep dive on them just because it's out of my lane. But again, if you find something that works for you, amazing. Because really, we just want to feel better because when we're in the weeds, and I was there, and that's why I understand our community so well. I was massively symptomatic, like to the point where I would like kind of be hard on myself and be like, why am I having so many symptoms when I've been, doing my best or trying to, eat a nutritionally sound diet or like nutrition wise, I'm like doing my best and I'm trying my best to do this and do that. But I had probably, I don't know, most of the symptoms, a lot of them, I had a lot of the symptoms that we talk about on our 103 chart, to the point where I was having such bad hot flashes that I looked at my husband one day and I said, if I don't find a solution, I don't, this is really tough. Like how could I couldn't do anything. I had 3 kids. I had a full, my job, I had a full-time career, entrepreneur, and I could not get out of bed half the time. Or if when I did, I would like every minute and for 30 seconds long, I was like sweating profusely. Then I was freezing and then I was like stripping. And I mean, it is not quality of life. So you need to do whatever you can to make yourself feel better and take control of those symptoms so you can have your quality of life back.
What was the thing that made the biggest impact for you to get rid of the hot flashes?
Supplements for sure. For me, supplement. I mean, it's hard to tell because I mean, I was already nutrition wise following a certain thing, exercising as much as I could. I mean, wasn't always consistent with it, but I hear a lot of women say exercise is incredible for managing their symptoms, which it is. I mean, exercise is fabulous. Weight training, which I'm obsessed with now. I love it. But I would say supplements is really what, and that's why I decided to go down the supplement route with Morphus, was because I had tried so many different supplements, and a lot of them, by the way, that were, you looked at if you look at the research, they're actually used for women in perimenopause and menopause. But and I tried a lot of them, but a lot of them worked. A lot of them worked for 5 minutes. A lot of them didn't work and actually caused harm to my body. So that led me down, because of I love research so much, that led me down to really doing deep dives on supplement ingredients. I'd already been an expert on food ingredients. So now I was like, all right, I'm just going to take my knowledge and the way I do my research and apply it to ingredient research. And then I started speaking to ingredient suppliers and understanding, looking at the research, what these ingredients are doing to help women in perimenopause and menopause, or at least for, symptoms or specific ways that women were feeling. So I would say for me, supplements made the biggest difference, and it was I got my quality of life back because of them. But I was already doing nutrition and lifestyle. So that's an important marker. I'm not going to say it was only the supplements and it changed my life, but no. I was already doing the nutrition and the lifestyle piece. It was the missing link for me.
Exactly. That's why a lot of women, I do meet a lot of women who spot on. I mean, they're exercising, the diet is spot on, and they were trying to manage their stress and exercise and the sleep. They're trying to get it all together. And it seemed for the most part, yeah, like they're a picture of perfect health, but yet they still struggle with the symptoms. So it's not just because you're healthy or you're healthier or you're trying harder that you're going to have fewer symptoms. And then you have people who are doing all the wrong things, like wrong in the sense of having an accelerated aging, and they have no symptoms. And you're like, well, wait a second. So there is no correlation that we're finding. I think, I do believe the healthier you, the more you try, perhaps the symptoms will be lower, or perhaps they will go away, but it's no guarantee, at least I've seen in my community, that that you will have none of these symptoms if you're perfectly healthy. And then of course, being perfectly healthy is probably not healthy either. So I wanted to know which supplements, but before we dive into that, I can't remember if you just said that you tried the bioidentical for the hot flashes or not.
So by the time I tried my bioidentical hormones, I'd already had my hot flashes under control. So my symptoms were gone by the time I tried the hormone. So I can't really speak to it taking away any symptoms for me, because at that point I was asymptomatic. I just wanted to try them to see what it would do for me. So I can't really speak to the fact that, did it get rid of this or did it get rid of that? I actually didn't have those symptoms at the time I tried it.
You hacked it with the supplements. So now we want to know which supplements work the best for hot flashes.
So there are some amazing supplements, and also like combination of supplements. So for me, there's a supplement called Pycnogenol, PYC, Pycnogenol. We have Morphus Pycnogenol on our website, and that's been shown to help with, I don't know, over 30 different symptoms, which is absolutely incredible, including hot flashes. I also really like DIM for my body. And that's that's something, DIM is something it's much for women in perimenopause. It can be very beneficial with helping with estrogen levels, but also with the sore breasts. So a lot of women, including myself, had very painful sore breasts, which that's why a lot of us think we're pregnant. in perimenopause, and we go and we get tested and we're like, wait, what? Am I pregnant? So that can be very beneficial. But for women who are in menopause, just note that DIM can also lower estrogen levels as a whole. So just being mindful. But I like that combination. That really helps me. That's what I take currently. And that's what helps me manage my hot flashes and my night sweats. So that's been an incredible combination for me.
If you stopped, then the hot flashes would come back. Have you done that little test?
Yeah, they come
Still
back
are.
for me. So they come back for me. The other thing is magnesium. So we have a cool and flash free bundle, and magnesium for a lot of women has been shown to reduce hot flashes. Just taking it on its own for me did not do the trick for hot flashes, but I know that some women say it does help. I kind of joke around when I was trying to look for a solution for my hot flashes because that was the most debilitating. I mean, I just, like I said, it prevented a quality of life for myself. So I did and tried everything I possibly could to try to manage them with supplements. And like, I would joke around and be like, oh, I would like, when I was suffering, I'd be like, I would do anything. I would stand on my head and drink apple cider vinegar. I would do anything to see that, what's going to help me do it. But yeah, that combination is really what helps me manage my hot flashes.
So pycnogenol, is that what we said?
Yeah, pycnogenol and DIM, that
Yeah.
combination is great. And then also for some women, magnesium, which is why we have our Cool and Flash Free bundle on our website. So you can try that.
Cool and Flash. That's what it's called.
Cool and Flash Free bundle.
That's a good name. Yeah. It's a great name.
Creative.
How many milligrams of magnesium are in there?
Well, so we sell magnesium. So we sell it as its own individual. So our magnesium, I always say, is like, oh my gosh, I love our magnesium. It is the best. It's so good. So magnesium, each capsule has, so you can get it on its own. Each capsule has 150 milligrams of bisglycinate and a little bit of oxide. And the trick is that tiny bit of oxide, actually the way it absorbs and it's super gentle in your stomach, our magnesium is the best. And it's amazing for sleep. So if you have issues with sleep, so we've got our magnesium. You could try our magnesium. And then we also have our Sleep Buzz product, which I formulated myself, that has our magnesium in it with a little bit of like L-theanine, lactium, and sustained release melatonin. It is also amazing for sleep. Like I was just thinking about it this morning because I wanted to experiment. Like I always experiment with dosages because obviously always follow the dosage on the bottle, but I experiment as my N of 1, back to your point. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have my Oura Ring or my sleep tracker. I'm actually going to now look at another one. And I'm like, it's amazing for deep sleep, REM sleep, total sleep, staying asleep, falling back asleep. Like it's awesome. So
that's the bundle one. Which one is that?
So this is our Sleep Buzz and our magnesium. That's called the cortisol calm bundle. So it's specifically for sleep. The magnesium is amazing because magnesium, what's great about magnesium bisglycinate is it helps to relax your body. So there are many different forms of magnesium that you could take. Most of us need more magnesium. And looking at, I'm sure you probably talked about this, looking at the blood levels of magnesium is really not a good indication. But if you're having eye twitches and muscle cramps or, Charlie horses, if you wake up in the middle of the night, which, for me, I know if I'm depleted in my minerals and especially my magnesium, my body will tell me, but most of us are deficient and we need more magnesium. And the research supports it. There was amazing research that was done, I think it was last year, on cognitive health and magnesium, and also for women in menopause. So magnesium helps with, obviously we need it for like hundreds of functions in the body, but taking magnesium and eating magnesium rich foods, taking a supplement if you're not getting enough food, which most of us are not because our food is depleted in a lot of minerals, unfortunately, right? So supplementing with magnesium to me is an absolute foundation for women in perimenopause and menopause because it'll help you with so many things, including your sleep, but also like energy, which is that we talked about fatigue being the number one symptom. Try taking magnesium. Magnesium can help with your energy.
Yeah. Well, if you're sleeping better too, that's a double whammy, right? So
yeah, exactly.
There's a friend of mine who just popped in this morning and I gave her a bone formula. She's got osteopenia. And I was like, okay, try this. She went home, she came back and she said 3 days, I think she said 3 or 5 days, 5 days, I think she's been on it. And she says, this stuff makes me really sleepy. I've been taking it at night, but I'm having the best sleep. Like, what is it?
Amazing.
And I looked at the bottle. I was like, I don't remember what's in there. It's a bone formula. I didn't give it to her for sleep. Magnesium.
Magnesium. Yeah. It's Magnesium is magic. That's what I like to say. I like to say magnesium bisglycinate is like the superhero with the red cape. It helps with so many different things, and it's affordable and it absorbs well. Like, so yeah, it's one of my absolute favorite foundation supplements for women in
Do you
perimenopause.
have a bone formula?
We do not currently. We do not.
Okay. That you got to put some magnesium in there.
Another thing that's really important talking about bone is vitamin D with vitamin K. I don't have it on our website, but I highly recommend going and getting yourself vitamin D, getting tested for vitamin D, number one, very important, like we talked about earlier, but also taking vitamin D with vitamin K2 MK7, because what it does, the K2 helps to usher like the vitamin D into the bones. And that's what it's really important. It's kind of the Sherpa, think of it. So I would say for bone health, absolutely that, and looking at magnesium as well, and your protein, all that. But yeah, that would be important.
Let's mention a little bit, because we talked a lot about the supplements, that Morphus supplements that or is it We Are Morphus supplements?
So our company is called Morphus, but
Okay.
and the supplements are called Morphus, but our website is We Are Morphus because it was taken. So the URL.
Okay. So you said this is your own formula, because as a nutritionist, I think you were probably, I'd have heard you on their podcast too. You were frustrated with not finding good quality things. So what makes Morphus better than anything else?
So for me, it's about the research. So the research is important, making sure that whatever we take. So it's so interesting. Before I got to where I am now, I would take everything and anything. I was an N of one. I was willing to try anything when it came to supplements. Oh, this is supposed to help with this. Oh, let me try it. Oh, let me try it.
Like
but
all
now,
of us. We're all like that.
all us the biohackers, right? But or like you said, the biohackers. But truthfully, I'm not like that anymore. I am so careful about what I put into my body now that I'm in menopause. I am not that adventurous, I'll try anything person anymore. Even things that are like, oh, it's going to help with this and that. No, no, no. So because of that, I wanted to come up with a line of supplements that I was 1000% comfortable putting in my body, that there was no link to liver issues down the road, or like anything that we know that could possibly cause an issue for women as we get more into perimenopause and menopause. So for me, that was the number one thing. I wanted to come up with a line of supplements that I take personally, and that Randy, my business partner, take personally, and that I would recommend to my mother, my sister, my best friend, to anyone around me, and obviously to the women in our community. So because I'm so particular about what I put in my body, that's why I wanted to come up with ingredients and products that I was like, yep, I'm good with this because I know this will be beneficial. Now, not everything is good for everybody. So that's an important thing to say, right? Like, I want to be very clear. Again, if you take our Fiber Us and you're like, it doesn't make me feel good, then don't take it. Like, I never want you to take something that you are not comfortable with. So I would say that was the most important thing to me, and that they had research behind it. It's not just, it's not just like, oh, you should take it because I heard this from someone. It's no, take it because the research shows that this is what it's going to help with. So that's important. We use branded ingredients. So we don't use, in the supplement world, there's something called fairy dust. So you could use a little bit of something and say it's in it because it contains it, but it doesn't really have enough to make a difference. Everything that we have has enough to make a difference. It's based on research. And this is important for me, that what you're going to take, I'm comfortable that knowing that it's something that's really good for us in this phase of life, for the majority of us. And B, also that it's going to do what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you sound like Leslie Kenny. You know Leslie Kenny from
I
Primeadine?
don't.
Oh,
I don't know.
She's so amazing. So everybody who follows me knows that I'm a big fan of spermidine, but particularly Primeadine, because this is a formula she's making. She's just like you, where she created this because she wanted to be sure that there was nothing bad in there, because she had her own health struggles and just couldn't take anything. And so she revealed a lot about the supplement industry and what goes on behind closed doors. And it's kind of scary. And I think it's women like you, hopefully, because I don't know you as well, but like you and her who really have integrity and want to put in the best and not just go for a quick buck and cut or fairy dust things. So I got to take a little deeper dive into your supplements because I'm trusting you are like that. You sound like that. And
Oh my gosh. I remember this is the best story. I love to tell it. When I first started, I knew nothing about the supplement industry, like before I got into it. And because I was more in the food industry. And I sat across from one of our, it's a co-packer who they make supplements. And I remember he said to me, this was like my first meeting. And he looked at me, he's like, okay, so do you want to go and create a product based on price, or do you want to go and create a product based on efficacy? And I'm like, you're joking, right? Like, what do you mean based on price? He's like, well, look, a lot of the companies that come here, they're like, we don't care how it works, if it works, but as long as it meets this X dollar, price point, that's what's important to me. And I was like, absolutely not. It's about efficacy, because if they don't work, will I even be in business? Like, I don't understand. Like, it's so anyways, it was very interesting and very eye-opening to me. And I've heard crazy stories. I did an interview with somebody. So all of our products are third-party tested by a very large company, a lab called Eurofins. And I interviewed somebody who works at Eurofins, and he was sharing some stories about the industry that are just like, yeah. So I probably would have a lot to chat about with your friend.
Yes, I'll put you in touch because she's absolutely
Thank you.
amazing. And I could talk forever. I did not expect to talk so much about supplements or anything like that. But now we got into it. I am a supplement junkie. Let's move on. We only have a few minutes left. And I don't even know which, I have so many questions. Let's see.
Well, we can do this again, and you're coming on my podcast, so we can even talk more.
We'll continue the conversation there.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
So the one last question then is, well, actually tell us, what are the connections between diet, menopause, and then the long-term health outcomes like osteoporosis and heart disease?
That is a very good question. Well, I mean, diet, again, nutrition is the foundation for everything. Can you absolutely say that if you do this, this, and this, that you're, not going to get that, and that? Of course not. But at least you're setting yourself up, because there's so many things at play. I mean, there's nutrition, like there's a lot we can control. There's nutrition we can control, diet, lifestyle, all of that we can control. But then there's a lot we can't control. Our genetics. I mean, we know now epigenetics and all of that, but like genetics play a role, environment plays a role. I mean, there's so many different things that come into play. Our stress levels play a role, right? Where now we don't cope with it as well as we did before. And lots of great stories about that. So I would say there's a huge connection, doing what you can to help minimize those outcomes. Like for everything we just talked about for the last, hour, is doing what we can are doing the best we can to help with that prevention. But is anything guaranteed? Of course not, because there's a lot that's out of our control. But what we can control, that's why I'm like, okay, let's do what we can. Exercising. So you have your nutrition aspect of it, but you also have the exercise, the movement, the weightlifting, right? The making sure that we have muscles. We now know that muscle strength is linked to longevity, right? Our thigh, our quad muscle is linked to our brain. Like there's so many things that are linked to it, like physically as well. So I would say, I hope that answers your question, but that I would say that there's a huge, massive link from what we're eating, how we're living, what we're putting in our body, and us being in menopause and preventing certain things like the big three: the heart disease, the brain health, and the osteoporosis. And if you look at a lot of, like, if you look at, I don't know if you know Dr. Uma Naidu, she talks a lot. She's a nutritional. Okay, so she's amazing. Talks a lot about what we can do for our brain from the food that we're eating, looking at certain foods that are excellent for brain health, looking at foods that are excellent for bone health, avoiding foods and eating certain foods that are excellent for heart health. Like we know trans fats, we know that it can lead to heart disease. We know so many of the foods that you may want to eat on a regular basis can lead to certain things. So just being mindful. It goes back again to what we talked about earlier about being mindful of what you're putting in your body, and certain things that we know, according to the research, that could potentially harm ourselves, right? So trans fats. And now again, thankfully that we're not supposed to be consuming them because they're not supposed to be in our food, but there are loopholes. So that's where reading labels is really important, and making sure that you understand what you're putting in your shopping cart and then bringing home, right? And then how much of it you're eating. So companies can say certain things on food labels, So that's why understanding ingredients is really key. And that's what we talk a lot of. My book is, we talk a lot about ingredients. That's my expertise. That's where a lot of my knowledge comes from. So that's why our book will be very, very much about nutrition and those additives, a lot around those additives, and hydration too. Like, even hydration is important. Hydration helps to, with our brain, it helps with our energy levels, it helps with so many different things in our body. So there's so many things that we need to pay attention to now, but at the same time, just living your life and being mindful, but not overly cautious, I think, is because that, again, like we talked about, could be that detrimental thing to ourselves, is key. Balance. At the end of the day, it's about the balance, I think.
Balance and do your best. That's all you can do. And
That's all we can do, and not, beating ourselves up over it, right? And I think that's important too. Being gentle with yourself, being kind to yourself. We didn't even talk about mental health, but like the whole mindset and mental health plays a massive role too. I'm constantly talking to myself, constantly. Like, I am constantly saying my mantras. I'm constantly, because I even see myself, like, managing my stress is a lot harder now. So I'm always trying to do what I can. Listen, I'm very far from perfect, but I am trying to be very kind to myself. I am kind to others, not always kind to myself. And now I've made a very concerted effort, as I'm in my, I'm 54 right now. And I'm like, I've made a very big promise to myself to try to be gentle with myself and be kind to myself, because at the end of the day, it's so important that I treat myself with the same respect that I treat everyone around me with, so that to me is like key.
I don't even need to ask you that last question. With the last question I always ask guests is, do you have any last words for a woman going through menopause? And I think you just answered it right there.
Yeah.
So everyone can find you at wearemorphous.com. There's a link I'll have in the show notes to the research. You're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and I'll have a link as well to the supplements. I wasn't expecting to talk so much about supplements, but now I'm curious. I want to go dive in a little bit deeper to it.
Yeah.
You don't, by any chance, have a discount code? I know I didn't throw this at you because I wasn't really expecting it.
Yeah, I will definitely give you for 15% off. I can give you one, absolutely. So you can put it in the show notes. Yes.
Yay.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrea. Are there any last words that you did want to add that you normally ask that question, or are you all good?
I think we're good. I think I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate you talking about my research. And if you can just, if for those of you who are listening and you want to help our research, to me, I would be so grateful if you went and filled out our surveys, because we are going to continue getting more published, which is very exciting, and just continue to to hear you and listen to you. And that's the most important thing, is we are listening to the women who are filling this out, because there's a whole section that you can leave your comments, and women need help, and we need things to change, and thankfully they are changing now. And healthcare practitioners and doctors and everybody, they're, the menopause conference that I was at last week was sold out. It's amazing. First time, somebody was saying it was like the first time I think it was ever sold out. So things are changing, and I am so happy and grateful to see that women are being helped and are being supported and are being treated, because we need it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrea. And I'm sure we'll have a part 2 because I still have more questions.
Thanks, Laura.
Have a great day.
You too.